Welcome and good evening. It's nice to see everyone who made it out tonight. We're very thankful for your presence, and those of you who are joining us online, welcome to Stone Tower Church this evening, where we have a beautiful message on modern infections. Our speaker for this weekend is Walt Cross. He's spent 20 years in conventional medicine and 20 years in lifestyle medicine. And what he shares with us tonight is from many years, not just of theory, but a lot of experience and hands-on. So I want to welcome Walt Cross. Will you come and join us and share with us what the Lord's put on your heart tonight?
Good evening, y'all. Shall we start with prayer? Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you put up the stop sign, that we can just plumb stop from work and school and toils, that we can just spend time with you. Lord, this evening, as we look at how to more effectively care for our bodies, as we look at the systems that you've put into place, Lord, help us to learn them, understand them better. Give us the willpower to apply them. And Lord, we ask that you bless. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, it's good to be with y'all here this evening. Tonight, I'd like to share with y'all modern infections. One of the challenges that people have when they move out of the cities, they move to the country, is what do I do if there's not a doctor? Or maybe it's you're still in the city, and I'm concerned with some of the conventional ways of doing health care. How can I address that? There's two ways of doing it. There's proactive, there's reactive. And unfortunately, there's times we have to be reactive. But if at all possible, the best thing to do is being proactive. More than $120 billion is spent each year in the United States on infectious diseases. Can you imagine what we could do with that? Can you imagine what we could do in soul winning with $120 billion? It's huge. That's a lot of money. I'd like to first look at statistics. Number of physician offices with office visits with infectious diseases as a primary diagnosis, 15.5 million visits. Can you imagine? In the United States, we're going to the doc 15.5 million times with the primary diagnosis is just an infectious disease. Number of emergency room visits or emergency department visits with infectious disease is the primary diagnosis. The primary diagnosis, 4.1 million. Y'all, these numbers are pre-COVID. Number of emergency department visits, which resulted in a conversion over to in-stay in the acute care facility in the hospital with the principal hospital discharge diagnosis of infectious diseases, 448,000. That's a lot of folks. And the sad thing is primarily preventable. Tomorrow we'll share a little bit on the issues of diabetes. The first 20 years of my career, I never saw a patient care plan that said reversal of diabetes. It was always diabetic management through pharmaceuticals. We now see over a 98% reversal rate of type 2 diabetes. It's amazing. Diabetes is one of the easiest things, type 2, to reverse. Cardiovascular disease. We see a huge reversal rate of cardiovascular disease. It's preventable. Cardiovascular disease primarily is preventable. Type 2 diabetes is primarily preventable. Obesity is primarily preventable. I like prevention. I also work in firefighting. Last week was 40 years ago that I went into firefighting. And each year I go into the school system. I'll be in the school this coming Wednesday teaching the children. This is Fire Prevention Month. As we compare I personally, as I see structure fires, home fires, residential fires, but I've seen a significant less amount in the last 40 years, but the the United States Fire Administration, as they look at the statistics, it's significantly dropped. There's two primary reasons that home structure fires have reduced, and the number one reason is new codes. The second major reason is us going into the school system and teaching about fire prevention in the month of October. How many of y'all remember the fire department coming into your school when you're in elementary school teaching you about fire prevention? It's effective, y'all. Next Wednesday, I will go into the school system and I will stand with those kids as I share with them in the gymnasium. I will test them on what I talked about last year, and they will hit it right on. They will remember each of those items I covered last year. It's very, very effective. As we look at prevention in infectious diseases, number one is wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. And that's something we do. Who works in healthcare? Absolutely. Is it wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands? All the time. Your hands maybe even get chapped because you're washing your hands so much. When you walk in the door, before you eat, after you eat, before you go to the bathroom, after you go to the bathroom, before you smoke, after you smoke. Y'all don't smoke, but those that do smoke. Between patients, we're constantly washing our hands, and that is huge. I actually sometimes don't like gloves because we actually had better infection control by hand washing because people say, I was sitting with my dad in the hospital not long ago, and they would go from room to room wearing the same gloves. They weren't washing their hands. They're not foaming in and out, and they were they were covered. They had gloves on, but they were carrying those infectious diseases between patients. So water and soap, alcohol rub, and the interesting thing is not all pathogens are killed the best by alcohol, and not all pathogens are killed by soap and water. So if you want to make sure you get both of them, some are killed better by alcohol, some are killed better by soap and water. So what's the best thing? Use both of them. But hand washing is critical. Practice respiratory hygiene, covering your nose, mouth when coughing. Throw the tissue in a closed bin. When we grew up, what did Dad have and what did Granddad have in their pocket? A handkerchief. And I'm so glad handkerchiefs are gone. I can remember my granddad or dad pulling out that old handkerchief that they'd used and then wipe my old snotty little nose and wipe my brother's little snotty little nose and then maybe my mom would use and go back and it was a breeding ground. We don't want handkerchiefs. We want to throw it away in a trash bin. And a closed bin's better yet. And again, wash your hands after regarding respiratory hygiene. Maintain social distancing, especially coughing and or fever. What I'm reading here is from the World Health Organization. This is the World Health Organization's recommendations. It used to be stand at least 1 meter apart. Now they say at least 2 meters apart. How many of y'all grew up on a farm? Do y'all know what horse sense is? Common sense. Just use common sense. If you're standing there and you're picking out your strawberries and someone's sneezing beside you or coughing, just step away. Don't stand up next to them. And so as we look at social distancing, if someone's coughing, if there's an issue, just step away so that you're not affected by that. Avoid touching your eyes, mouth, and nose. Is that difficult? A lot of people rub their nose, touch their mouth, whatever. And that's a great way to get infectious diseases in you, those orifices, in your eyes, in your nose, in your mouth. And that's a tough one. We just have to try to learn not to do that. Mask and personal protective equipment if there's an issue. It is so nice. I'm looking across this group. Last week I was in Redding, California. I couldn't see anybody smiling. I couldn't tell if they were listening or not. I mean, there was no expressions. All I saw was eyes. It's nice. If you are unwell, if you're sick, stay home. And again, that's just horse sense. I was riding in a plane somewhere several years ago, and my family originally is from Sweden. And the man was sitting beside me on the airplane, and we were talking, and I was trying to learn as much about where my grandfather's family was from. And I asked him, so tell me about social medicine. Tell me about your thoughts in health. And he said, if you're sick, the employer does not want you to come to work. Don't come to work. Don't infect other employees, because that affects productivity. It's better if you see symptoms, stay at home. Until you're well, then come on back to work. And they weren't dinged for that. That was promoted. If you have a fever, cough, or difficulty breathing, seek early medical care. Again, I'm reading from the World Health Organization. But that's not enough. It is not enough. And I'd like to share with you some more prevention that can make a lot of difference. And there's three major ones. And I'll mention those three major ones. I have people who come and they use all the good stuff. They use allicin, they use elderberry, they use colloidal silver, vitamin C, and they're doing all this. But if they do these three, any one of these three, it can undo all that money, all that time in what they were just doing. And I'll show those as I look here. The first thing is the fuel. What is the fuel that you're putting in your body? Is it a whole food, plant-based diet? But just not whole food, plant-based. When I took nutrition from T. Colin Campbell at Cornell, Campbell would say whole food, plant-based diet. But that was not just the only thing Campbell, who's ever listened to T. Colin Campbell, Forks Over Knives or Plant Pure Nation? Campbell was just, he's a great guy, tremendous guy. He would say whole food, plant-based diet, but with variety. See, if you just had same old, kind of like dog food, and you just ate a few fruits and vegetables and you didn't eat a variety, you would have health issues. Because a banana has certain nutrients in it. A carrot has certain nutrients. A mango has certain nutrients. An avocado has certain nutrients. Wheat, oatmeal has certain nutrients. Pecans has certain nutrients. And you need a wide spectrum to keep your body running. I'm taking a course right now in the program. He would have his wife, for their children, have a different breakfast every morning of the month. Every morning. There was different fruit. There was something today, there was different fruit tomorrow, different fruit the next day, different fruit the next day, different grains, different nuts, in order to increase the nutrition going to those children. Broad spectrum. Who's ever been to an orchestra? Anybody been to an orchestra? What if they just had a trumpet, a violin, and a tuba? Would that be an orchestra? Not at all. We need an orchestra of nutrients for our bodies. So also, no refined sugar, and that's the first number key, sugar. We know that one soft drink, a 12-ounce soft drink, wipes out your immune system 50% for how long? 4 hours. Sprite, Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew, whatever it is, the average soft drink that's just 12 ounce, and most people don't just do 12 ounces. I had a guy come into me not long ago, and he had some health issues, and I said, well, how much water do you drink? I don't do water. What do you drink? I forgot what soft drink it was. I said, how much do you do? 3 liters. Can you imagine drinking 3 liters of soft drink a day and what that's doing to their immune system? Just a 12 ounce will wipe out your immune system for 4 hours. Now, let's say that you got a Snickers bar. Now, before I started understanding this, and I worked in regular health care, I did a lot of teaching then also, and I would go places, and so to get energy, I'd pull over and get me a Dr. Pepper and a Snickers bar. Well, the Dr. Pepper in of itself would wipe out my immune system 50% for the next how many hours? 4. But I added a Snickers bar. Now, I'm not talking the candy bars today. They're like this. I'm talking when we were kids, years ago. The little ones. I was given a demonstration not long ago, and I couldn't even find a small bar in the gas station. They were all big bars. But it was just a little bar. Take that little Snickers bar and that soft drink. It wipes out your immune system. Well, let's look and see. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, if y'all can all stand up. All, including the lady who's in the red dress. Okay, let's see. Okay, if the fella can sit down, we're just going to borrow the lady. Great. Okay, so I think that's 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's 14 people. Okay, now I'd like just the pastor to stay standing and everyone else sit down. So let's say you're playing a basketball game and the other team had, or football game or whatever it was, and the other team had 14 players, and now you're the only one able to play. Unless you're the Harlem Globetrotters or the Queen and her maids or whatever, you don't have a chance. Well, what happens? You can sit down. So what happens is when we drink a 12-ounce soft drink and a Snickers bar like this or 2 Reese's cups, it now wipes out your immune system. It takes out 13, anesthetizes 13 out of 14 white cells, is what we're told. You're now running on 1 white cell for every 14 white cells for the next 4 hours. Now, can you see why when you eat sugar, it affects your immune system? Let's say you're going out and you're getting a milkshake, an average-sized milkshake, or maybe a slice of cheesecake. Sounds good, doesn't it? That one slice, average slice of cheesecake, that one just regular milkshake will wipe out your immune system 92 to 93% for the next 4 hours. And we wonder why so many folks are sick. The next one is routine exercise. Exercise is critical, and the best is if you exercise multiple times a day. Dr. Walter I forget his last name. Walter, Kempner, Walter Kempner at Duke University. He found that if we'll exercise 4 times a day, it significantly increases our body's function. And we'll talk about that later, Dr. Walter Kempner. The next one is adequate water. There are so many people who don't drink water. And I have people come in, as I said, they just say, I don't do water. I don't like water. Water is very important. According to UC Davis, it takes a half a gallon, 4 water bottles to run a 5-year-old. From a 5-year-old up to 128 pounds is 4 water bottles, a half a gallon. That's to sit on the couch. Now, if you're an active person, it takes more than that. Over 128 pounds is your body weight divided by 2, that many ounces per day, unless you're just very, very large. That's to sit on the couch. Now, the state of Tennessee tells me that I'm supposed to drink a gallon of water a day because there's a high probability that I may go into a structure fire. Now, if I go fight fires with the United States Forest Service or the United States Park Service, like the fires y'all have had in this region, I'm required to drink now, it used to be a gallon of water every 2 hours. Now they require me to drink a gallon of water every hour and a half. So water is so important. What do elephants drink? Cows? Horses? They all drink water. Alligators? God made us to drink water, and water is critical for our body's function. We'll talk more about that later. Sun exposure, exercise is good. Serotonin, which is good for our brain function, melatonin. But the big one there for immune system is vitamin D. How many of y'all know what your vitamin D level is? Vitamin D is critical for the immune system. We used to think a good vitamin D number was 32. Years ago, remember that? Years ago, we'd think 32 was a good number. No, it's 30 to 100, but 30 is really not enough. There's a direct relationship between vitamin D and your immune system. Have you noticed people taking vitamin D if they catch COVID? It's now recommended, and we'll see in a minute, over 100,000 IUs a day. It's not, and this is a key to remember, it's not how much you take, it is what your blood level is. I had a lady come in and her vitamin D level was 12. She was taking 5,000 IUs a day. 12. That's peanuts. That's not doing anything really. So she doubled it, 5,000 twice a day. She went to 17. Still not enough. Again, the low is 30, but really anything below 50, you got to have 50 as the minimum. So then we went 20,000 twice a day. She went to 24. I'm trying to think, why? 20,000 twice a day, that's a lot of vitamin D. What do we need to do? And then a new study came out and said if your magnesium is low, you can't make the vitamin D. So we added magnesium and boom, she shoots up to, it was like 97. So it's what the blood level is. B12. Someone comes in and say, do I need B12? I don't know, let's look at the blood. What does the blood say you have? It's like someone going into the doc. Do I need, how's my cholesterol? Can the doc tell what your cholesterol is without looking at your blood? He's got to look at your blood. And so you need to know what your vitamin D level is because that's related to your immune system, significantly related to your immune system. It's also related to your brain function, related to your HDL. If you want to drive your HDL, your good cholesterol up, you want vitamin D. Make the right choices. Temperance. Many times we think that temperance is, well, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I'm good. But you've got to look at more, making the right decisions for your immune system. Again, what food are you choosing? What are you listening to? What kind of music are you listening to? Do you think there's music that can pull down your body's function? Absolutely it can. When I was a boy on the dairy farm, my dad decided to try to figure out how to get more milk out of the cows. And we had a fairly large dairy farm in that area. And so Dad, he tried different music, and this will date when he did it. He tried some gospel music. Not a lot of difference. He tried country music. Now this is when Hank Williams Sr. was around. Milk production went down. And then there was this new guy that sang that Dad really didn't care for, but Mom liked, and his name was Elvis Presley. He tried Elvis music, and it was terrible, the worst milk production we'd ever gotten. And then he tried something called elevator music, which we call classical music. And we had better milk production than ever. And from that point forward, Dad would play classical music in the dairy parlor. There was no dog barking, no hollering. He wanted it calm and quiet. Those of y'all ladies who have ever nursed know that being calm, you produce more milk. Well, the music you listen to can affect many things in the body. Immune system is one. How about what you watch? On television, can that affect your immune system? Absolutely. Or what about who you run with? Can who you run with affect you? Sure can. Fresh air. Exercise, again, out in the fresh air, open the windows, good diaphragmatic breathing is very, very good for function of the body in helping with the immune system. The next one is rest. This is the second big one that has the stars on it, and that is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation significantly wipes out your immune system. And that's my biggest challenge because at night, if I have a structure fire or if I have a major wreck on the interstate and I'm up many hours, especially if it's cold weather, raining, snow, sleet, very easily I can be sick the next day because that sleep deprivation can wipe out your immune system. The best time to be asleep by Harvard University for an adult is 9 o'clock in the evening. How many of y'all know what the limit is? Okay? When we were in school, they did not teach that our brain had a lymphatic system, but it does. It's called the glymphatic system. We learned that around 2014. And for the glymphatic system to turn on, you need from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, it does a deep clean in the brain and flushing the brain, cleaning the brain. Just like your lymphatic system cleans the system throughout the body. But then between 10 o'clock and midnight, Harvard says, it does a thorough clean and flushes the toxins out of your brain. But to clean your brain on a daily basis, you've got to be asleep between 9 o'clock and midnight, or you don't adequately turn on the glymphatic system. 8 hours of sleep we find is more important. We used to think, well, I can get by with 6 hours sleep. Well, now they're saying less than 7 hours is sleep deprivation, not 6 hours, now less than 7. And now Harvard is now coming out saying, well, you really need 8. But here's the problem. How many folks out there have interrupted sleep? It might be us guys getting up to go to the bathroom. It might be someone has pain. It might be you're just worrying. You wake up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep because you're worrying about the kids. Y'all know what I'm talking about. We've got to have that uninterrupted sleep in order to get through those 4 stages so we have good REM sleep. And when we don't have that, we don't have good sleep. So it needs to be uninterrupted. So that's daily sleep, but what about weekly sleep, rest? How do we get weekly rest? Right now. The stop sign went up just maybe an hour ago, and God said, stop. Spend time with me. Rest. Don't worry about work. Don't worry about school. Don't worry about bills. Just spend time with me. Spend time with family. Spend time in nature with me. Is that a blessing, y'all? Can you attest to that? Yes. Then there's annual rest, and that's vacation. I think it's good to have vacation. If it wasn't good, employers wouldn't give you a vacation. You're more productive if you have your annual vacation. So that was number 2, lack of sleep. And the last one, the most important one, is trust in divine power. Pray, ask for good health. Can you imagine? God says, pray, and I'll help you. Remember the time they went out and they did something? Remember? And they didn't pray. He said, I would have given you more if you just asked for it. How many of y'all have children? Do you want your children to ask for something if they need help? If they're struggling financially, if they're struggling with a situation, don't you want them to come and say, give me some advice, help me out here? Well, God wants that. So we need to ask Him for health. And then ask Him to bless the treatments that you're using, whatever you're doing to keep that immune system up. And then spend time with Him. A big challenge out there today is stress. Stress is the number 1 diagnosis in America. According to the World Health Organization, it will soon be bypassed. Soon, according to the World Health Organization, depression will be our number 1 diagnosis in the United States. Stress is huge. Do y'all see an increase in stress lately? Stress blows your immune system. It's actually worse than the sugar. Now, you drink that soft drink, and it lowers your immune system. How much? How much? 50%. And for how long? 4 hours. Stress is worse, according to Dr. Neil Nedley. Who's heard of Neil Nedley? Nedley talks about the challenges of anger, stress. 1 minute of major stress will wipe out your immune system, not 4 hours, but 6 hours. Who has major stress? Finances, traffic, COVID, whatever it is. Stress is huge, and that will significantly wipe out your immune system. So how do you deal with stress? I mean, yes, you can take B-complex, you can take lithium orotate, you can take magnesium, you can take lavender and vetiver, and all those do help. I've got a lady who comes in to see me. Her son is in prison. Several years ago, he shot a state trooper. He'll probably be in prison the rest of his life. She told me she can never go see him. She can never go hug him again. Can you imagine that, moms? Never being able to hug your child again? And maybe not even go see him? Distressed significantly. And so I said, here's what you need to do. Take a piece of paper and draw a T on it. And on this side, write controllables. On this side, write non-controllables. Now, I want you to write down every single stressor in your life. Whether it's your work situation, finances, whatever it may be. Write them down. And then I want you to take that list and put them either into the controllable side on the left or the non-controllable side on the right. Can this lady change the fact that her son probably will never get out of prison again? No. If she cries and frets and worries the rest of her life, is it going to change it? No. That's a non-controllable. And so what I encourage her to do is on this side over here, it may be that person who did something terrible, awful to you a long time ago. As Dr. Walter Strachan would say, yes, that was terrible, awful. It should have never happened. But we need to go this direction because we cannot change that. Playing with it does not change what happened 50 years ago, 60 years ago, or whatever. Look towards heaven, he said. And so I encourage this lady to take that piece of paper, rip it in half, and sit down and have a conversation with God. And say, God, I can't do anything about this list. Will you please take it? Now, don't take it back. Give it to him. Now, will God take that kind of thing? He will. And then, is that gone forever? No, Satan's going to come back and he's going to dangle that in front of her. And I said, when he does, you say, in Jesus' name, Satan, get thee behind me. That is God's problem now. You go talk to him. Now go and get out of here. Does it work? It does. And so the controllables, does that mean you give them plumb to God? No, those are controllables. So what you do with those is you go take God's hand and you say, God, help me with these, and you work through those. And God will help you work through those. Stress is huge. That's number 3. So what was the number one thing that will wipe out your immune system? I call them the 3 S's. What's the first one? Sugar. Number 2, stress. Sleep deprivation. Yeah, sleep deprivation. Number 3, stress. Those will just plumb wipe out your immune system. So let's look at some chronic diseases, some of the most common infectious diseases around. First one is influenza A and B. Sudden fevers, chills, muscle aches, headaches, tiredness, sore throat, congestion. If one experiences these, they likely have the flu. Between 3 to 11% of the people in the United States get it each year. It usually clears up within 2 weeks, but one may be tired for a while. For small children and the elderly and those with weak immune systems, it can be dangerous and even deadly. So what do we do now we're going to talk, we talked about prevention. Let's talk about what can we do. And I'll talk a little bit about prevention, specific prevention, and some treatment. So good prevention on influenza. If you're around somebody, you think you've been affected, probably one of my favorite is allicin. Allicin is garlic. It takes 24 cloves of garlic to make 1 drop of allicin. Then, if you want a teaspoon of it, it's going to take 2,240 cloves of garlic. Very powerful. The next one that I like is oil of oregano. Who's ever used oil of oregano? It's powerful, isn't it? Now, don't use just 100% oil of oregano and stick it in your mouth. You'll burn your tongue, your throat, your stomach. You've got to cut it. You don't want to use it neat. Neat means by itself, N-E-A-T. So you want to cut it with like olive oil. So what I do is I'll take 1 part oil of oregano and 3 parts olive oil. You can buy it that way. Or you can buy the straight oil of oregano and cut it, a correction of 1 to 3. 25% oil of oregano, 75% olive oil. And then you can take 2, 3, 5 drops, put it in a glass of water, put it under your tongue, swallow it. Once, if you feel like someone else is sick, it will boost your immune system tremendously. If you feel like you're catching something, have you ever, you start getting a little stuffy here, your throat's starting to bother you a little bit here, feels like someone's sitting on you, you don't have the energy, your head feels like it's puffed up, take the oil of oregano. If it's not gone, and the key here is the incipient stage, that is the very beginning stage. Soon as you feel it, and that's my challenge out on the fireground, is I don't have my oil of oregano out on the fireground with me. And I need to figure out how to do that. So once you feel it starting, immediately take that oil of oregano. It's amazing. It's right? Phenomenal. It's like kicking it out of the football field. If it's still there 2 hours later, do it again. Keep doing it every 2 hours. The challenge is, who's ever heard of Tamiflu? Tamiflu, that's a drug. It's a drug they use for if a person gets a flu. But does Tamiflu work? Do they say it works if it's after 48 hours? No, you got to take the Tamiflu within the first 48 hours. Even on the natural things, or God's natural remedies, we need to hit it as quick as possible in that incipient stage. Those are two huge ones right there. And then get your sleep. Another thing is if you're starting to feel sick, we used to would drink orange juice. Remember that? But that's not good anymore, we found. I remember the first time I was at a lecture, and a good friend of mine, a physician, was speaking, and he said, if you feel like you're sick, catching something, don't drink orange juice. Don't drink any fruit juice. And I thought, Phil, what are you talking about? No, orange juice got vitamin C. But then I started listening to him. He said the vitamin C in the orange juice, who knows when they juice that orange, has the vitamin C oxidized off. But also that vitamin C has sugar in it. What kind of sugar? Fructose. And so if you're sick and you want orange, eat an orange. Eat the fiber. Because the fiber makes the sugar, the fructose, time released. Let's say a person has a low blood sugar. Do you give them an apple or apple juice? Apple juice, because it's a lot faster. It gets into the villi, into the blood a lot faster. But if you put fiber there with the apple, it slows it down. It makes sugar time released. So it's slowly, and that's a good thing. So if you're sick, don't drink fruit juice. Eat the apple, eat the orange, eat the banana. Oh, you don't juice bananas, but you know what I'm talking about. So let's say a person gets a UTI. That's an infection. So they're catching a UTI. I'll get to that in a few minutes. So you want to not drink the fruit juice. You want to eat it. So those are things on influenza. Get your rest. Another one is staph infections. Staph is huge out there. I remember one time I was walking down the hallway with our chief medical physician, and we were walking down the hallway, and he says, Walt, I want to see every order that is made for a antibiotic. And we had 30-some attending physicians, and he said, I want to see every order. I said, you know it's going to make them mad. Why do you want to look at it? Now, this was back in the mid-'90s. He said, we are using cannons antibiotics when a BB gun antibiotic would do the job. He says, someday, I predict superviruses. Are we there? Yes. He saw the future because he understood physiology. There are more than 30 kinds of staph bacteria. Staphylococcus aureus, which is the most common one. They often live on the skin and sometimes the lining of the nose, but they can get into the body through a cut or a sore. This can cause an infection that can be serious or life-threatening. One can treat most staph infections with antibiotics. Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA or MRSA, doesn't respond to penicillin-based drugs, those methicillin-resistant drugs. It must be treated with a different type of antibiotic. And we use a drug called what? Vancomycin is an example. So what can we do for staph infections? If it's an open wound, I use hydrotherapy. I'll use 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold. You can use Epsom salt in the water. You can put golden seal on that wound, which is extremely good. Frankincense, myrrh, pine sap is really good. And we'll talk about these tomorrow afternoon, how to treat infected wounds. Also for staph, which is a bacteria, you know, I talked about the golden seal. Also the allicin is very good, which comes from garlic. Allicin is amazing. Allicin is antibacterial. According to NIH, allicin is antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, antimicrobial, and antiparasitic. And God gave it to us in garlic. Isn't God good? God is so good to us. So I'll talk about someone tomorrow morning. Hope you come back tomorrow morning. I'll talk about a person who had vancomycin-resistant staph. That's the one you die from. That's the one this doctor said there was nothing else could be given. And I'll tell you about what we used that God blessed. E. coli. Most strains of E. coli bacteria are harmless. They live in the gut and help one digest their food. But some can cause urinary tract infections or pneumonia. Others cause belly pain, vomiting, diarrhea, can be bloody. The usual cause is eating contaminated raw vegetables, undercooked meat, especially ground beef. That's the type of food issues, not the urinary tract. The illness usually starts 1 to 10 days after one has been in contact with the bacteria. If it's food poisoning, or if a person gets E. coli from food, what's the best thing to use? Charcoal. It's amazing. It is phenomenal. What if it is, let's say if it's a urinary tract infection? D-mannose. What'd you say? Cranberries, yes. Here's the problem. I'm going by the nurse's station one day, and the nurse tells the physician, Mrs. So-and-so has a UTI. Doc responds back, give her 1 cup Q meal of cranberry juice. 1 cup per meal of cranberry juice. The dietitian's there and says 1 cup's enough. Not enough. She needs a quart each meal to get enough of the chemical that's in the cranberries. Well, what's the chemical that's in the cranberries doing the job? You said it. D-mannose. So D-mannose is extracting the chemical that's in cranberries, just like allicin is extracting the chemical out of what? Garlic. Or like bromelain is the chemical in what? Pineapple. And so the D-mannose, you can get a lot of D-mannose, like that nutritionist said, but not have the, what sugar? Fructose. Because here's the problem. You got a urinary tract infection, and you're giving a quart of sugar that doesn't have fiber, it just doesn't match well. So by using the D-mannose, 1 teaspoon every 2 hours. If it's really, really bad, every 2 teaspoons every 2 hours until it's taken care of. It is the best thing I have found. Urologists send their patients to me many times for their patients to take D-mannose, even for IC, interstitial cystitis. So what's it good for? It's good for urinary tract infections, bladder infections, kidney infections, IC, interstitial cystitis, and also honeymoon syndrome. And so the D-mannose is amazing, something God gave us that, kicks it out of the ball field. It works extremely well. Yes, we could use corn silk, which is also good for kidney infections, but the D-mannose works very, very well. Also, forced fluids, because here's a key in D-mannose. Ladies tell me within 15 minutes the itching, stinging, burning is plumb gone. Gone. But here's how it works. The D-mannose goes in and it starts collecting the E. coli. It's like a magnet. And they start eating it. It's like sugar. It is sugar, a type of sugar. And they start eating it. Well, if you don't force fluids to get it out of there, they go, hey, 2 hours later, they're going to send us a new meal. And so you got to force fluids. Have any of y'all ever seen a skunk get rid of fleas?
Yes. Don't they go down into the water?
Exactly.
And then they collect on a leaf or something?
Yeah, what they do, you're exactly right. They'll go and they'll get a bunch of grass or something in their mouth, and they'll go to still water, and they slowly back down. The white stripe turns black because all them fleas moving up. Keep slowly going down, and the green grass starts turning what? Black. Full of what? Fleas. And finally it goes down till just the nose is there, and then it goes down underneath, swims away, and leaves all the fleas floating away on the piece of grass. Well, using D-mannose, what it does is it collects all that E. coli. And as we force fluid, we urinate out the D-mannose, which has all the E. coli stuck to it, or a lot of it. 2 hours later, we're going to get more, and we keep doing it until we get rid of the E. coli. That's why the D-mannose works so well. Also, the garlic works well for that. Herpes Simplex 1. Herpes Simplex 1 causes most oral herpes, also called fever blisters or cold sores. It is common that more than 50%, this is amazing, more than 50% of U.S. adults get it, usually through mouth-to-mouth contact. It is thought that it cannot be cured, but over-the-counter medications relieve symptoms and can shorten healing time. Now, I'm reading from medical stuff here. Through herpes simplex 2, though herpes simplex 2 is more commonly causes genital herpes, one can spread herpes 1 to genital areas through oral sex. How do we get rid of, or how do we address fever blisters? Pardon? Cayenne pepper, okay. L-lysine. L-lysine is probably the most effective I found. You can take it by mouth. You can also topically put it on there, put it on the cold sore. Shingles. Anybody ever had shingles? It's tough, painful. Shingles is a viral infection that causes a painful rash. Although shingles can occur anywhere on your body, it most often appears as a single stripe of blisters that wraps around either the left or right side of your torso. Here's the best thing I have found for shingles, and I've been addressing shingles now for about 17 years this way, and I've only found one person out of all the people who have come to me with shingles or called me regarding shingles, only one has it not worked. And I learned this from a good friend of mine, Dr. Agatha Thrash. The first thing I use is olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract, 800 milligrams, 3 times a day. That kills the virus. Olive leaf extract is excellent for killing viruses. When I go to Africa, I will go and I'll take olive leaf extract, 800 milligrams, twice a day, 30 days prior to going, the whole time I'm there, and it's phenomenal on helping you to keep from getting malaria as a preventative. Number 2, so the olive leaf extract kills the virus. The next problem, what exacerbates? What makes worse shingles? Stress. That's right. I was back in 1978, an old doc at Florida Hospital told me, he said, Walt, if you want to address stress, the best thing I have found in my career, and this guy was just drug pushing. He didn't do natural stuff, but he found that B complex significantly helps with stress. So I'll do B complex 100 milligrams or B complex 100, because depending on which B, there's about 8 B vitamins there in the complex. Some are milligrams, some are mcgs, micrograms, depending on which one. But it's 100 of each of them except the folic acid. And you take one of those each meal. One of those each meal. And I say with meals because with some people, B vitamins can hit the stomach kind of hard. Phenomenal on helping with stress. Urine will turn orange, but it's amazing. So during the time of the shingles, B complex 100, 1 each meal. If you only do 2 meals a day, just drink the third one with a big old glass of water. The last one, we used to use charcoal poultice over the affected area, over this area here. But then we found that a castor oil pack, and we'll talk about that tomorrow night on how to make a castor oil pack. A castor oil pack on that region significantly helps in both drying up the shingles, and if they've already dried up, and you know how they can dry up but they still can be painful, helps to get rid of the pain. And so place a castor oil pack on there, place it on for, some people say for 12 hours, put a new one on it, or re-soak it, you can reuse it and re-soak it. I like going only 11 hours, stopping for 1 hour. If you can, clean it. Sometimes it's so painful you can't wash it, but at least let it air dry, because you'll see tomorrow night when you come why you need to take it off and let it air dry, and then place it back on for another 11 hours. You can do that morning and evening, but that works extremely well to dry up those shingles. Syphilis. Syphilis starts as a sore on one's genitals, rectum, or mouth. They can treat it quickly with penicillin. If they don't take care of it, it can progress through phases that range from full body rash to brain damage. A mother can pass it to her baby through pregnancy or childbirth. what can we do naturally for syphilis? You can use calendula or calendula, or Najee can help me with the more accurate way of saying it. But calendula or calendula, burdock root. Burdock root is another one good for it. And another one is black walnut. Black walnut. Those three are very good to address it. Some folks will use fever treatments. Dr. Agus she would treat it with fever treatments, but instead of the oral temp being at 102, 103 for syphilis and gonorrhea, she would push it up to 106 to 107. But if you're doing 106, 107 oral temp and a fever treatment, you need someone there that has some medical experience, because that's getting that temperature on up there. Gonorrhea. Gonorrhea spreads through unprotected sex. Common symptoms include discharge. It may also hurt when you urinate. Women may have pain in their pelvis or their belly. They can have discharge. Antibiotics keep it from leading to infertility and an increased risk of HIV. How do you address gonorrhea? Again, Dr. Thrash used fever treatments. In China, one of the best treatments that is used is using kudzu. Who's ever heard of kudzu? Have you lived in the South?
I had a pumpkin pie recipe called for kudzu.
Pardon?
I had a pumpkin pie recipe called for kudzu.
Kudzu? Really? Kudzu? Who's ever seen kudzu? Kudzu, I think, kudzu. It grows the best in the world in the southeast United States. It grows a foot a day in the summer, in July, August, September. It came to America first by the Japanese at the World's Fair. I believe it was in Chicago, the same year the big Ferris wheel came. They brought it to show us they thought it would be a great ground cover. In the early 1900s, the 20s and 30s, the United States government paid farmers to grow it for cattle feed. The plain people, Amish and Mennonites, they'll grow it to feed cattle in areas which are prone to drought, where it may kill their hay crop with the drought, but the kudzu roots grow 30 to 50 feet deep. They can be as big around as Mary Lou is. They're huge. They have a main central trunk root that goes out, and then as the vines go out, they have little bitty roots. You want the big main root. And what they do, you can take the leaves and you can make, Mary Lou's made kudzu lasagna. You can take and you can cook the leaves like spinach. You can take that most distal end that grew over the last 24 hours, scrape off the outer bark, cut it off, put it in a pot, and cook it like noodles. In China, let's say you get up in the morning as a lady and you start a pot of boiling water going, you throw a chicken in there and you throw a big old kudzu root in there, and it's full of nutrients, like throwing a bone, like bone broth. Yes?
Kudzu's known for curbing your alcoholic cravings.
She's exactly right. I have ladies that come and get kudzu from me. They'll go to Walmart and they'll buy a bottle of multivitamins. They'll dump it out into another container. They'll come and get kudzu pills from me, pour it in there, and they give it to the husband who drinks and say, "Here, hubby, here's your multivitamins."
That's why we made the pie.
There you go. Research shows that kudzu root will lower the desire for alcohol 40 to 60%. Now, this is NIH, National Institute of Health. So there's great research on kudzu. Works great for, can even help with stopping smoking. But what they do in China for gonorrhea is if you get, and many other diseases, they're really tough ones. What they'll do is they'll dig up the kudzu root, they'll dry it, they'll powderize it, and then they mix it with water and make a gruel. And you eat a bowl each meal, and that's all you eat. A bowl each meal for 30 days. And the physicians in China say they can wipe out gonorrhea in 30 days by using kudzu gruel. Amazing. Norovirus. There are several causes of food poisoning or stomach flu. Norovirus is a major one. It's highly contagious. It often spreads through contaminated food, water surfaces or objects. One can also get it as if they are in close contact with someone who has it. It causes gastroenteritis or inflammation of the stomach or intestines. This brings on symptoms like diarrhea, vomiting, belly pain. It is thought that there is no treatment. It is thought that there is no treatment, and it usually works its way out of the system after a few days. One must replace the fluids that they lose in order to prevent dehydration. What would you use for norovirus? What? Charcoal. Who's ever used charcoal? Isn't it amazing? It's tremendous. Just get you a big old scoop of it and put it in a glass of water and stir it and drink it. It tastes like dirt, but you can take a straw and it throws it back in the mouth a little further. Or if you don't like the taste, go and take 3 to 6 capsules and swallow it. Be cautious on the on the pills, because the pills are at least, if not more than, 50% binder. So you're only getting 50% or less charcoal, so it takes even more if you're using the tablets. Salmonella. If one eats raw or uncooked meat, poultry, or eggs or products, they are at risk for salmonella infection. One may not have the symptoms, but if they do, they feel like the stomach flu. One must drink as much water as they can. Diarrhea and vomiting can cause dehydration. This infection often passes before one test results return. What would you use for salmonella? Charcoal. God is so good. He really is. Pardon? Pneumonia. The lungs contain hundreds of millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. Bacteria, virus, and fungi can cause an infection that inflames these sacs so that they fill with fluid or pus. This can be mild or serious. If one is elderly, a child, or has a weak immune system, it can be life-threatening. One can have trouble breathing, chest pain, tiredness, and a bad cough. It can be treated with medicine. The tired feeling may last for a long time after one has had it. What are things that we can do for pneumonia? Cayenne pepper, garlic. Allison, absolutely. On pneumonia, I'd probably be hitting it with, because pneumonia can be life-threatening. I would hit pneumonia with a tablespoon 3 times a day of Allison. What's another good treatment?
Hot and cold therapy.
Exactly. Y'all know this. Hydrotherapy, hot and cold. 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold. 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold. And if you are able to, do both the front and the back. And you can do what's called a revulsive treatment, where you lay the patient down, put their knees up in the air, put their feet in hot water, and then you put the hot fomentation on their back, hot fomentation on the chest, and then you lift them up, take a bowl of ice water with a washcloth, and you rub their back really quick, called a cold mitten friction, on their back for 30 seconds, and then dry it off, put another hot one there, put a barrier towel, and then do it to the chest, back and forth, 7 times, twice a day. Extremely, extremely successful in treating pneumonia. Hepatitis C. Hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver due to a virus. Most new infections in the United States are from type C, or the form type C. One can get this type from contact with infected blood, such as with used drugs or tattoo needles or transfusions. Symptoms include fever, tiredness, belly pain, nausea, jaundice, yellowing of the skin or eyes, but almost half of those who have it don't even know they have it. Antiviral drugs will stop it, but without treatment, it can lead to liver failure, liver cancer, and in some cases, death. So what part of the body is majorly affected with Hep C? The liver. The liver. And so what is the best herb to attack liver issues? That's right, silymarin or milk thistle. Milk thistle, 2 ml, 3 times a day, hit it hard. You can also use olive leaf extract. Vitamin C is probably the biggest one out there that folks use. Vitamin C to bowel tolerance, or even IV vitamin C is very, very effective. Vitamin C to bowel tolerance is where you give the vitamin C until they have something called green apple two-step. Who knows what green apple two-step is? What happens if you eat too many green apples? It gives you the two-step, the trots. So it gives you a loose stool. So you take the vitamin C, let's say 2,000 milligrams every half hour until you have diarrhea, whether that's 12,000 or 50,000. You then go 10% down, and you stay at that. And what you do is you take that, let's say it's 50,000. Then you divide the hours of the day, because vitamin C only has a half-life of 30 minutes. So let's say you're up 12 hours, let's say you want to do it over 12 hours during the day. So you take the 50,000, divide it by 12, and you take that every hour. If it gives you a loose stool, you back up. Now here's the cool thing about vitamin C. The sicker you are, the more vitamin C it takes. As you start improving, you start healing, your bowel tolerance reduces. It doesn't take as much. So that in of itself will let you know, and within a couple of weeks, it's not uncommon, is say you're at 50,000, you're in 40,000. You back down, it takes 40,000 before you have bowel tolerance issues. So as that person improves in health, they will be able to tolerate less and less. And so you watch for that. So that's Hep C. Also, allicin is good to use for Hep C. The common cold. The common cold sounds minor, but it may not feel that way. This viral infection of the nose and throat can cause a runny or stuffed nose, cough, or congestion. And that general rundown feeling. The virus can live in the air and get in the body through the mouth, eyes, and nose. Hand-to-hand contact is another way it's spread. It can also live on objects such as doorknobs and toys. One can treat their symptoms, but it is thought that there is no cure. It is thought. It is recommended to just rest, drink fluids, and wash one's hands and keep from spreading it to others. If you feel like you're starting to get cold symptoms, again, the allicin, the vitamin C. My first one is the oil of oregano. That's my first attack. It's phenomenal. If you start feeling you're having cold symptoms and you catch it in the incipient stage, there's a good chance you can knock it out and you don't even have to take that in 2 hours later. If you didn't catch it in the incipient stage, you may have to take it a few times, but it is amazing what oil of oregano does to wipe out the common cold. But what's the best way to prevent these? Prevention. The big 3 S's. What's the number 1 S? The number 2 S? Sleep. Number 3, stress. Follow those 8 laws of health. And so often we think, oh, that's just those 8 laws of health. How long ago did we find out about those 8 laws of health? Can anybody tell me what year? General Robert E. Lee. Remember General Robert E. Lee? He had the Northern Virginia Army. He was traveling one Friday from Fredericksburg over to Culpeper. Now, have y'all ever seen those yellow flags that says, "Don't tread on me"? Well, that came from Culpeper during the Revolutionary War. So Lee's traveling from Fredericksburg over to Culpeper on Friday. Lincoln wants to cut him off. So he sends Hooker down and tries to cut him off, but Lee happened to be, as he tries diagonally cutting him off, but Lee was ahead of him, and Hooker missed him. Lee made it to Culpeper, and then continued on to the Shenandoah Valley, headed north. This was Friday, June 5, 1863. Headed north to Pennsylvania. What battle do you think he was getting ready to go into? Pardon? Gettysburg. That's exactly right. Well, that day now, was that a long time ago? That was a long time ago. That day that Lee was cutting over to Culpeper, that evening, a lady by the name of Ellen G. White left Battle Creek and went over to this little town to visit some fellas that were doing an evangelistic series. that evening, this information was given to her in a vision. We've had this information for how long? 167 years of those 8 laws of health. Are we using them? Or do we just ignore them? They're huge. Okay, let's talk about what we're dealing with now. We're almost finished. Coronavirus. What are some of the signs? Shortness of breath, a bad cough, increased respiratory frequency, taking 30 or more breaths per minute, O2 sat, blood oxygen saturation less than 93%, temperature of 101.4, loss of taste. Y'all know we're dealing with this right now in America. What can we do? Elderberry inhibits the early stages of an infection by blocking key viral proteins responsible for both viral attachment and entry into the host cell. The phytochemicals from elderberry juice were shown to be effective at stopping the virus infecting the cells. And that's what we've been looking for in the coronavirus, something to stop that attachment into the lungs. However, to the surprise of the researchers, they were even more effective in inhibiting viral propagation at later stages of the influenza cycle when the cells had already been infected with the virus. This is dealing with influenza, but we're also finding it same with coronavirus. We're seeing very similar effects. This comes from the University of Sydney. This observation was quite surprising and rather significant because blocking the viral cycle at several stages has a higher chance of inhibiting the viral infection. Now, there's a lot of folks that said, well, elderberry could cause the storm to get worse. It was a hypothesis. Well, so they say, don't use elderberry. Well, maybe it does on day 4 of a person becoming symptomatic. But we've seen plenty of people using elderberry with success in treating and not having any issues of increasing the viral storm. The storm. Alimed, or the allicin. According to the National Institute of Health, allicin is an active ingredient of garlic that has antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, and antiprotozoal activity. NIH further reports that allicin exhibits various biological properties like antimicrobial, anti-cancer. Did you get that? We use that for cancer. Anti-cancer, antioxidant, immunomodulatory, anti-inflammatory, hypoglycemic, and cardiovascular effects. So allicin is really good. So we found if we'll use the company in England where we get the allicin, they recommend 1 tablespoon. Well, if it's a mild case of coronavirus, not a lot of symptoms, they recommend 1 teaspoon 3 times a day. That's 2,240 cloves of garlic per teaspoon. But if it's a major case of coronavirus, they're recommending a tablespoon 3 times a day. And we're seeing phenomenal outcome by using that. Vitamin D, we talked about vitamin D earlier. This is, I'm getting this from Youngberg. Y'all have heard of Youngberg. Youngberg recommends, this is preventive and maintenance. Most need 5,000 IUs daily. Again, I say, look at the blood. Look at the blood. Not how much you take, look at the blood. Infected use up to 50,000 IUs once or twice daily for 3 to 5 days. Depending on severity of symptoms, an adult may take 50,000 IUs dose 1, 2, or even 3 times a day for 3 to 5 days only. This is only for a few days and then resume the normal daily dose of 4,000 to 10,000 IUs a day. There's a physician down in Atlanta, Georgia, who's been using vitamin D to kill cancer. She's doing like 110,000 IUs a day for the first 2 weeks, and then goes to 80,000 every day thereafter until the cancer's gone. She's pushing the blood level up to 205. She says when it gets up over 130, 160, the blood level, yes, you're prone to kidney stones, or could have kidney stones. Not very prone, but could have. She says, I can deal with kidney stones much easier than I can deal with stage 4 cancer and that person dying. Also, if your blood level gets over 100, there's a minority, extreme minority, you have to monitor for arrhythmias, but that's an extreme minority. Children should all be taking a minimum of 2,000 IUs of vitamin D daily. If infected with symptoms, could use 1,000 per pound of body weight daily for 3 days as a way to further mobilize their immune system while it is under attack. and this is for children. Vitamin D is huge. We use that. We're having folks take, very similar to what Youngberg's saying here, during the duration of the symptoms. Vitamin C. Vitamin C, preventive maintenance. Let's go to if infected. The body can absorb much higher doses of vitamin C without any gastrointestinal distress. Many find that increasing doses up to bowel tolerance 3 times a day is helpful to support the immune system. And the reason most folks say 3 times a day is folks just don't want to do the every hour. It's just, we're looking for compliance. But if you want to really be effective, because the half-life is only 30 minutes, it's more effective to go through every hour. But if at least 3 times a day. Children can benefit as well by taking doses consistent with their bowel tolerance. Again, going to that, what do the bowels do? Again, Youngberg. Iodine, a natural antiviral, antifungal, and antibiotic. Iodine was the most effective agent for killing viruses, especially influenza viruses. Aerosol iodine was found to kill viruses, and sprayed mists and solutions of iodine were equally effective. We're also finding just taking the iodine PO by mouth. Folks are taking, 12.5 milligrams, 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, easy 50 milligrams, as long as they're not hyperthyroid, as long as they're not hyperthyroid. We're running out of time here. Let me finish with a story. In the Spanish influenza of 1918, it started in January of 18, and it went until when? December of 19. So it lasted pretty well 2 years. The students from Graysville moved from Graysville, Tennessee. They moved down to a little town called Collegedale, and Southern Junior College. The girls were in a dormitory, but the boys were not yet in a dormitory in 1918. They were living in tents. That fall, they had 13 inches of snow in Collegedale in the fall, which is a lot for Collegedale that time of year. That's where Mary Lou and I met, was at Collegedale. That's where I went to school, at SMC. The kids got the Spanish flu. So this young fellow who had just come down from one of our colleges, I'll think of it in a minute, up in, I don't remember it, but came down, a young fellow, nurse, and he got an assistant, and he started doing the hot and cold fomentations on the students. Went through all the students improved. Not one student died from the influenza. There was another college that was new over in a place called Huntsville, Alabama. And what school was that? Oakwood, yeah. Those students came down with the Spanish flu. So this gentleman and his assistant went over to Oakwood, treated the Oakwood students. Not one Oakwood student died. They were, again, only doing the hot and cold fomentations. By this time, a second wave had come through Collegedale, and those students, again, were getting the influenza. So he goes back to Collegedale and starts treating the students again. Not one of the students died from influenza, except, well, he and his assistant got it this time. He lived, but his assistant died. He himself couldn't treat him because he was sick himself, and his assistant died. And he regretted that until he died, that he couldn't have taken care of this fellow. I had just gotten out of school, SMC, and there's an older gentleman. He was nearly 100 years old, and he was in Orlando. And he said, I need to tell you something. You're getting out of school and healthcare. I just need to tell you this in case you may run into a pandemic again, and it may be in your lifetime. He says, there's a good chance you may. He said, in World War I, our men were dying significantly. They didn't want the press to know it, but they were dying from the Spanish flu. And finally, there was one treatment that stopped the men dying. And he said, I performed it on many, many men, and that was the hot and cold fomentations to the chest, just as. But there's one more story I'd like to share. about 20 years ago, I was teaching a class, and I'll talk about it tomorrow afternoon. But this lady is in the back, and I'm talking about pine sap, and she's way in the back of the room, and she raises her hand. Now, we're smart if we listen to those that are older than us, aren't we? They've got a lot more sense, many times. They've got a lot more experience, at least. And she says, "Can I tell you something about pine sap?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "When I was a little girl in 1918, I'm like, boy, that's been a while. She says, my brother and I would go with my daddy as we would go house to house in Southern California as my daddy was treating patients with the Spanish flu. He was a nurse doing house calls, going into the house, taking the children into the house as he's treating these patients with Spanish flu. Was that serious? I mean, that got my attention. Very contagious. She said when we got home at night, he would take a pine knot and put it over fire and allow pine sap to drip out into a glass. And then we would all three drink that glass of water. All three. And we never got the influenza. I said, "Ma'am, how many drops? How much water?" She said, "I don't know. I was a little girl." When I went back to East Tennessee, I used to work at a place outside of Washington, D.C., and that's where I'd heard her story. I went back to East Tennessee to finish raising my kids in the mountains of East Tennessee, and I was teaching folks about pine sap, and these mountain ladies would come and tell me when they were a little girl, before school buses, and they would walk to school, their mothers or their grandmothers would give them a little piece of pine rosin to chew on the way to school as they walked to school. And it didn't matter which community they went from, they used the measurement of a piece of a match head, from either a half to a full match head in size, and they would chew that every day on the way to school, and it would prevent them from getting sick. Isn't God good? God has given us so many natural remedies. And as people have come and called me or come whatever, we found significant effect in using these natural treatments for dealing with COVID or dealing with other issues. But I encourage you, don't wait until you have something. Use prevention. Just as is a house fire, don't wait until your house catches on fire to decide not to run an electric cord underneath your rug, or to put a door in front of your heater, or those simple things. Use horse sense. The same is true to keeping you from getting sick.
Horse sense and all the other sense. So tomorrow morning, Walt will be sharing with us The Unemployment Line is the name of the title of the message tomorrow for 11 o'clock. In the afternoon, he'll be sharing about old mountain remedies by health problems. And in the evening, he'll be doing hands-on demonstrations on old mountain remedies by the remedies and showing us practical home remedies that you can do just in your own home to help you, your family, and anyone else that comes across in your path to be a blessing to minister to their needs in a very personal, practical way. Would you join me as we close out in prayer tonight? Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for your Spirit to bless us with such wisdom and knowledge from on high. You use simple things to bring supernatural results. And I pray that you would increase our faith to trust you more, that your ways are always the best ways, that you wish above all that we may prosper and be in health, even as our soul prospers. And Lord, I pray for the anointing of your angels and thy Spirit to minister to the hearts of your people, that we may trust you more, and that we would come in harmony with your plans, not just for moral health, but also physical and spiritual and mental health, for what you've given us of principles to live by. Thank you, Father, for your grace and your compassion. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning.